Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Welcome back to Season 7. Who'd have thought it? 6 years of producing this flipping podcast. 6 years and 117 episodes. And for episode 1 of season 7, we're joined by our internet friend, George Greenslade. We've been chatting to George for years online, and George suggested some ideas for the podcast aimed at new riders. So be careful what you wish for. We thought George would be the ideal person to speak to. I hope you like tractors, because we do talk about tractors a bit. So you've got your bike. What are you going to do next? How are you going to find where to ride? How are you going to find pals to ride with? Let's get on with it. Anyway, it's nice to meet you finally after the last couple of years of chatting and sharing tractor pictures.
I've got a few tractors.
Where are your tractor pictures coming from, Clive?
My neighbour's got 2 or 3 and they're constantly changing and being added to. He's even started planting oats and stuff like that to justify buying the machines to go and harvest them. I went on a walk just around and about, and there was another farm up on the hill that's got about 6 slowly decaying tractors.
That sounds like my absolute heaven.
We were at a country fair over in Eskdale because Rachel was showing her fabric there, and there was a tractor show there as well. Some really nice old vintage tractors.
Were you about to say you're surprised I don't have a tractor?
Yeah, where's your tractor?
It's because we have a tractor in the family, which my brother has got his hands on. And for a long time, if ever you wanted to get the old grey Fergie going to go and get some wood, you would spend more time getting the old grey Fergie going to get some wood than you spent getting the wood. So I bought a Honda quad bike, and those days of getting the tractor going disappeared overnight. So I would like a tractor, but I know that with it can come quite a lot of fiddling about.
To be fair, a grey Fergie, they are pretty good. I've got 4. They should technically run fine and start easily, and of all the tractors, they're probably good. So maybe a bit of workshop tinkering and it'd be all right.
Are all yours running?
No. There's 4 in the sheds that aren't running currently, 2 of which are grey Fergies. I do have 4 grey Fergies. It is 4.
Are they diesel or petrol?
Both the ones that aren't running are diesel. The one I compete with ploughing matches, that's petrol TVO. And then I've got another diesel one that I don't really do anything with, but it does run and quite nice. But I don't know what the obsession was really. I just went through a stage of just kept buying tractors.
Is your work connected to tractors in some way?
Yeah. I'm a tractor driver and mechanic, yeah. Technically in the summer, I drive tractors, really. And then in the winter, I'm in the workshop doing the maintenance on them and stuff like that. So we're landscape contractors down in Somerset. So we do all sorts of things, really. I do a lot of hedge trimming. That's mainly the work I do is hedge trimming. Woodland planting, fencing, maintenance on just like schools and stuff like that. And then we have a sister company, which is owned by our family, Bridgewater Mowers. We've got a shop where we're still dealers and your normal garden tractors and stuff like that, garden lawnmowers. So I help in there when they're busy, which is where I am at the moment.
So you've got an excuse to have lots of tractors then?
Yeah. They don't all get used for work, but just ended up collecting them, and a bit of a hobby, really.
Just back to old grey Fergies. In the mid-1980s, before you were born, George, I was trying to come up with ideas. I was a budding, keen photographer, and I kept seeing lots of exhibitions, and I was always trying to come up with an idea for an exhibition. And I'd been to the Isle of Skye, and I noticed that in almost every field on the Isle of Skye was an old grey Fergie lying rotting. All the crofters, I think they were probably given some kind of incentive or some discount to buy an old grey Fergie tractor, probably after the war. And so they were all up there rotting away. They've all kind of disappeared now. I spent like a week just going around the Isle of Skye photographing old grey Fergies.
Really?
I didn't go anywhere, obviously. There was hundreds of them everywhere.
I have heard people say that. There was some kind of, I think, scheme at the time to help people out there. And when the Ferguson tractor was first produced, obviously it's in mass numbers, is the first production tractor, really. They were all over the world. They were shipped, and to try and encourage farmers, especially after the war. Obviously, it's all part of the war effort to grow food to help everyone recover, you know.
Yeah, it's a massive Massey Ferguson plant in Coventry, where I'm from.
Yeah. They ceased in 2002, I think, making them in Coventry.
It's a Sainsbury's now. Can't buy a bloody tractor there, that's for sure.
I think there's a direct correlation between motorcycles and tractors.
Wow, let's try and figure this one out then.
If you're properly into motorbikes and the mechanics of motorbikes, tractors are very similar, aren't they? There's a very exposed engine. It's a stripped-down vehicle. It's just wheels and an engine. They've kind of gone the same way as motorbikes in a way, haven't they? The modern-day BMW behemoth. It's very much like a Lamborghini tractor, isn't it? It's just oversized, ridiculously big.
It is very true. And like the BMWs, they're shaft-driven. Even the mechanics, when you get into it, are very, very similar, just on a smaller scale, and it's petrol.
And the engines are, call them stress members or something like that, of tractors and motorcycles.
My XT, I'm very lucky that I know a bit about carburetors from the mower shop. Otherwise, I would have never really touched a carburetor because it's all injection pumps, diesel injection pumps and things like that. It's just everything's on a smaller scale. But carburetor, I've had the carb apart 3 or 4 times I spent on that XT trying to get it right. At the moment, it's okay, running a little bit rich, but I think that's the sort of best way for it to be. I can't seem to get it any better than that. I find it very, very refreshing working on motorbikes. I love it. But I couldn't do with the paranoia of doing it for a job. I wouldn't like to fit a new wheel bearing in front of someone's motorbike, even though I'd do it on mine 20 minutes. I'd be worried about someone going down the road, that wheel bearing collapsing or heating up and something like, it's a dangerous game getting it wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, that must, if that does weigh on the motorcycle mechanic's mind, it must do, mustn't it?
You wrote a really nice note this week, and we've been chatting on and off for the last couple of years, George. One of the things you said is that the podcast kind of got you into trail riding, really.
Yeah, it did, to be honest, completely. I did my motorbike test far too late. Bit of a funny subject. I was with my wife forever. I'm still with her now, but I was with her forever. We got married. Unfortunately, the thing that sort of comes after marriage didn't really happen very well for us. And I don't know whether I should say on here, but we had quite a few miscarriages. Put immense pressure on our marriage as a whole. I'm very, very much, yeah, it's fine. It will happen. Don't worry. Whereas she, took it very hard. These things happen. She never wanted me to do my bike test because I used to race downhill mountain bikes. She thought I'd just kill myself, to be honest. I was always trying to go fast and mess about. And when we were kids, we had motorbikes in the fields and just anything, any bike we could lay our hands on it, we'd rag it around. I've got a Peugeot 103 moped that I used to do trials on in Mum and Dad's back garden. Dad never told me it's 2-stroke, so it'd run for 10 minutes and then seize up solid. I used to be able to hop it around and jump off benches and stuff with it in Mum and Dad's back garden. But like I said, it only ran for 10 minutes at a time because I think Dad definitely knew it was 2-stroke. I didn't think he wanted me to know that it would actually run for longer than 10 minutes.
So you weren't putting 2-stroke oil in it?
No, not at all. Just straight petrol. Seize the bugger up solid. Then half an hour later, it'd run again and I could carry on ripping up the garden. Very funny. Looking back now, it's very funny. And to be honest, I think I'd do it as well if I was in his shoes because I used to make a bit of a mess. I had no power, anything like that, but it was so much fun. My wife didn't want me to do my motorcycle test because she thought I'd kill myself. So when we did split up, we split up for quite a while. I thought, fuck it, now's the time to do my bike test. I went full bore, did my CBT, then did my Mod 1 and my Mod 2. Absolutely loved it. I did it in the winter. It was freezing cold and it was brilliant. Like a new sort of lease of life a bit. And that's one thing that I'll probably come back to later, just how motorcycling has just changed my outlook of sort of life. My instructor had a F800 GS BMW and it had a light guard on the front, the headlights, and that was it. I was sold because it was very much like a tractor or a Land Rover type thing. It was very rugged and I thought that is the bike for me. So I ended up buying it off of him. It's on 78,000 miles. It doesn't skip a beat. Completely fell in love with that.
Is that the same as yours, Noel?
It is, yeah. Because George got in touch with me after Ollie questioned my bike choice, and George sent me a very reassuring message to say that he had an 800 and he liked it and that I hadn't made a bad decision.
Have you made a bad decision, though?
Oh, I don't know yet.
Be honest.
Oh, I don't know. It's because I compare it to riding the 1150, and the 1150 feels so fantastic in comparison. I just want the 800 to be like that, and it's not like that at all. But it does have great acceleration. I feel I need to give it a bit longer and stick some knobblies back on it, yeah. big part of riding a motorbike is the engine and the way it makes you feel by the way it sounds and the way it feels. And it's not a great engine, is it really? You don't get a lot from it. You said you'd stuck an aftermarket can on it, which has helped.
But I'm not quite sure why that felt like it made a difference. It must be the sound, because I can't imagine a can like that would have made performance different. The one thing I did do is I changed the sprocket ratio on the front. That's helped at slow speed a lot, and acceleration obviously. And I did find that made quite a difference to it, because it was very much a touring bike before, whereas now you can front wheel comes up if you pull off too fast.
I put a bigger sprocket on the front and a smaller sprocket on the back, gone the other way on both ends, and it still feels like it's doing too many revs for my liking at 80 miles an hour, really. Or 70 miles an hour, as it is in this country.
So at this stage, George, you've passed your test, you've got your mid-weight GS. Do you know that trail riding exists at this stage?
Where we live, I quite often see trail bikes buzzing around and you hear them around. I always thought it was full-on enduro sort of bikes, to be honest. I've heard of the TRF, people like that. There's a chap in the village that I grew up in. He was heavily involved in the TRF, and I've known that they've organised days and things like that. Coming back to the podcast side of it, I was working in a field one day. To be quite honest, I love music. I love classic rock, modern hard style, and all sorts of different genres of music. But I get quite fed up with music when you're sat in the field going up and down the field all day. I quite often listen to the Archers, which is very sad, but I do really enjoy the Archers. At 33 or 32, sorry, the Archers is right on the street.
I gave the Archers another go today. I find it really hard to get into. There's a lot of overacting, I feel like. There's a lot of, oh, Marjorie, oh, I'm obviously reading lines. This isn't how people talk in real life. Oh, is it, Murray? Oh, what are you doing? It just doesn't sound real, does it? And I can't get to know the characters in it, but I do keep listening to it. And I tried it today and still couldn't get into it.
Can I just say about the Archers, I have a real problem with the Archers. It annoys the shit out of me because I don't like it. But the way I feel about the Archers is it's a soap opera, isn't it? It's a soap opera on the radio, but somehow it's acceptable because it's on Radio 4. But it's not. It's still a fucking soap opera. You get the comedy half an hour at 6:30, and you get a bit of news and you go straight into the Archers, and I enjoy the comedy. I don't like the Archers.
Do you know all the characters in it, George?
Pretty much. I know what you mean about not knowing the certain character. It's difficult when you can't put a face to the name. I don't know why, but I sort of have made up faces for people in the Archers.
It does sound like you're just about to compare us to the Archers in some way, though, so come on, fucking spit it out.
I like talking things, the things that get your brain going, but I've never listened to podcasts. I don't know why, but it's never really been anything that I've been into. So I had a quick look on Spotify and thought, what type of podcast do I want to listen to? I thought, well, there must be one about motorbikes, because I was always thinking of motorbikes. And you guys come up, and I thought, that's perfect. I was expecting talks about people riding road bikes. Anyway, I gave you guys a listen, and I actually listened to the first episode first, because I thought it's something that I would enjoy. So I went way back, listened to the first episode first. That's it, I was sold. So much so, even that night, when I got home, I went out into my shed and was still listening to it on my earphones. And I probably went through 10 episodes that day, because I was out in the tractor, then I was driving to work, and then as soon as I got home, I went out and listened to a couple more. So really, I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but you changed.
No, please do.
You completely changed my outlook of motorcycling in general, because it wasn't just the off-road side of things, it was the whole adventure. I've never even thought that people would ride their motorbike from Alaska to Argentina, or before then I would have thought they were completely nuts, to be honest.
I was exactly the same. Our stories are very similar, George. I just used to ride bikes around the field at home, never considered it was something you could travel on, and then stumbled across Austin Vince and everything changed. Did you get back together with your wife again?
Yes.
Hey!
I'm sure she won't admit it, but I'm sure that was partly to do with motorbikes. We started talking again. She knew that I was doing my Mod 2, so she didn't know about the beginning of the training or anything like that, but she knew about the Mod 2. And I passed, and the night I passed, I went and picked her up, which is probably a bit brave for one of the first times I was out on the road. I picked her up, and she hated motorbikes. She thought they were lethal, and as quite often people do that don't know bikes. But I picked her up, we went for a steady ride around, and she absolutely loved it, and which was great. We got back together, to cut a long story short. We had a little miracle 15 months ago called Martha, which was just, absolutely incredible, but we're so lucky to have her. My wife, Catherine, she actually did a test because she loved to go on the back of mine, and she all of a sudden changed her outlook of motorbikes. She did a test behind my back.
No.
One day she came home and said, "Oh, by the way, I can ride a bike now." And I thought she may have had training or done a CBT, something like that. She fully went out and did a bike test without me knowing. Yeah.
Well done, Mrs. Greenslade.
When you went and picked her up and she went on the back of your bike, what bike were you on, the little Peugeot when you did that?
Should have been. That was on the F800.
I suppose at this stage, you better introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you live, and that kind of stuff.
My name is George Greenslade, someone very new into motorcycling in general, let alone the adventure or the trail side of things. I live in Somerset, between the Quantock Hills and Exmoor. I'm a tractor driver for a job, and I'm a mechanic.
Out of all of us, you've got a name that I can imagine seeing at the bottom of a statue.
Do you reckon?
Isn't it, Clive? George Greenslade.
Yeah, it's probably one of those ones that are going to get torn down.
They might get torn down, yeah.
Some kind of slave-owning bastard.
I've never met anyone called Greenslade before. Do you know where it comes from or what it means?
But yeah, it's fairly common in Devon. I believe it's actually named after a Welsh valley. As far as I'm aware, I've never really dived into it too much, to be honest.
So, George, you wrote into us, and as I said, we've been chatting on and off about various subjects over the last couple of years, and Noel as well. You've been talking to both of us privately.
Secretly, it turns out.
Mainly about tractors, which is good. You had an idea of something that we should talk about. Do you want to kind of expand on that idea a little bit?
The reason I messaged you recently, there's so many people that are in my shoes that are very, very new and novice into trail riding, let alone adventuring, that maybe find the first steps a bit of a hurdle. I've recently joined the TRF, which is fantastic. I've met a couple of people so far that are very much in the same shoes as me, especially with social media nowadays. You go on Instagram and you see pictures of people in Argentina or all over the world riding their motorbikes, and they're fantastic pictures, don't get me wrong. There's still a lot of people that don't have a lot of time to spare to go away, or necessarily the financial funds, but love motorcycling the same, enjoy the green lanes. I don't have an enduro bike or anything like that. I've got an old XT600, which I ride on our local green lanes and trails, which for me, I absolutely love. I love the old Thumper. A lot of people have said to me that it's too big and be a bit heavy. I seem to cope with it fine.
How old is that bike? It's pretty old, isn't it?
It's on a D-Reg. It's an import. So it's a 43F. I'm sure some of your listeners will be able to help me on this one. D-Reg is 87, but I think it's earlier than that. I think it's an 86, so it wasn't registered initially.
My XL's registered on a D, so we're counting down, George, you and I, to the tax and MOT free bike, aren't we?
My XT I bought, Christmas just gone, so 9 months ago. It was in a barn for 15 years. It's actually my dad's best friend. He was like an uncle to us. It was his bike. Sadly, he passed away far too young. The last time it was on the road was 12 or 15 years, but it's been a long time. I did a few bits to it, but nothing major. Got it half-heartedly running, took it for its MOT, and it passed, which I couldn't believe, but I wanted to set the carb up on the road, you see. Well, not on the road, but going around the lanes. I wanted to be able to go out and test it. It's a credit, really, to the older bikes, because I'm sure newer bikes wouldn't survive being neglected for 12 years.
Do you always put the Gucci high-octane fuel in it?
Yes. I'm a strong believer in that, and this is coming from the workshop side as well. The modern fuel with ethanol, far as we are aware, the higher ethanol content draws moisture from the air. So if you buy a jerry can from a petrol station, use it to fill up your mower or something like that, you've then opened that can, that moisture has then gone in there, and if you keep repeatedly do that, and we fight with our carburetors for chainsaws, lawnmowers, the motorbikes as well, we find almost like Vaseline in the fuel bowls. That's that's a real common issue we have. We'll service someone's machine, it'll be running sweets and that, give it back to them, and then they use their jerry can they had from last season. It's no good and it won't run right, and that really is a real issue. And I think anything with the carburetor, even my old tractors that were petrol, they all run on super unleaders.
If I'm forced into buying E10 at a supermarket because there's none of the E5, I kind of panic a little bit. I need to use it quickly, I think.
George, we've done some beginners episodes before. What angle did you want to take on this conversation?
You have done beginner stuff before. They are very good. I wanted to really talk about the suitable bike and things like that. I know enduro bikes, and you say that light is right.
Let's talk about bike choice then, because I'm almost looking at the TET Facebook group pages. I've almost lost any interest in having conversations with people about what bike they should choose. 90% of the posts on there are people with bikes that are probably too big for their ability. So you see a lot of GSs, you see a lot of Africa Twins, you see an awful lot of T7s, all fantastic bikes. And in the right hands, they will, of course, go anywhere. But generally, they're not in the right hands. They're people that are just getting into riding. So many times you see posts from people that saying, look, I've just got my T7. I picked it up brand new from the dealers. Where do I find the maps for the TET so I can go riding? Part of me, I'm exasperated. I'm bored of telling people, get something lightweight, get something second-hand, get an older CRF if you can get hold of one, get an older enduro bike, because you are going to drop it.
Can I just chip in and say, it's equally frustrating for the founders and organisers and linesmen of the TET, because all the routes that they're coming up with them thinking, well, this is a great route for somebody on a medium to lightweight trail bike. They're not thinking this is great for someone on a T7. And you just get this endless, almost confusion that people think that it's a suitable bike for the TET, and it probably isn't, because the guy who came up with that route wasn't imagining you'd ever take your big bike down it.
Exactly. There is a thing on the TET page that says these routes have been designed with small to medium bikes in mind. So when you get Johnny has just got his brand new GS 1300 and it's got it stuck in a bog somewhere or stuck in a ditch, it's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't have taken that there.
Read the rather big print.
I reproduced it recently on our social media site, and every week you see on the TET page there is somebody stuck, isn't there, asking for help. People are great. People will go and help. The problem is people are coming from big road bikes and they think they should get a big trail bike. That said, it was really interesting because we went and did met up with some guys a couple of weekends ago in North Wales. So we turn up on our little enduro bikes, or CRFs, in fact, not enduro bikes, trail bikes. And most of them were on bigger bikes, weren't they? They're on 790s, 890s, 990s, an awful lot of much bigger KTMs. Now, all of these guys live further south than us. Interestingly, we went riding with the guys from Nomad Sweden. They're all on quite big bikes as well. So I think a lot of it does depend on where you're going to be riding as well. That said, if you are new to the hobby of trail riding, get a fucking smaller bike. Honestly. And if you don't come crying to me.
The ACT is obviously more geared towards bigger bikes, isn't it? And that's probably the get out. If you've got a big bike, then you're probably not at too much risk riding the ACT routes.
No, absolutely. They are totally designed for the bigger bikes, aren't they? Yeah. Well, we spoke to those guys. There is an episode, Noel. You've probably never listened to it because I don't think you were involved in it.
I don't listen to those. But where you live, George, it's quite tricky. I've ridden in the trail riding mecca that is the southwest. And it's some of it, I thought this would be quite tricky on quite a big bike. It's little tight lanes, isn't it, a lot of it?
It is, to be honest. There is a lot of trails, single track trails, very tight trails between high banks. Trails like that, I never take the GS down, to be honest. One, I can't turn around. So if I ever had an issue, I'd never really get the bike around sensibly. I do a bit of riding on my own, which doesn't help that situation.
Let's talk about the first time you went out green laning. What steps did you take before you went out green laning? Did you have an idea where you could and couldn't go? Presumably you were on your GS because the XT is a fairly recent purchase, isn't it?
Locally, I knew a couple of lanes that were a boat. I did venture...
Byway open to all traffic.
That's right. So I did take the GS down those, found it fine, to be honest. They're very wide open tracks. Really, they're farm tracks, which I knew from local farmers. I'm quite lucky because I do know quite a few people locally and they let me ride on their farm tracks and around the fields. In fact, a couple of days after I passed the test, I went up to see my mate up on Exmoor. He was a farmer up there. I knew that he was checking sheep, and he's got about 200 acres up there. And I thought I'll go and surprise him. He didn't know I'd done my bike test. I thought I'd go and surprise him, maybe a bit childishly, pretend that I was just someone up to no good. So I went ragging my motorbike round his sheep fields, and he sort of come and chased me down to find it was me. Which is, looking back now, it's stupid, but at the time it was quite funny. He found the funny side eventually, but he wasn't too impressed at the time.
He didn't come with his shotgun then?
No, luckily. I could outrun him on his gator anyway, so it wasn't too bad. There is plenty around. I find the XT really good, but the only thing is, it's not necessarily the most reliable. I'm quite fortunate in what I do that I'm not too afraid if it does break down. I quite enjoy taking my helmet off and sitting there and pondering and looking at the bike and think, what's caused that engine to stop, and just diagnose it slowly. But that's if I have the time. Well, as soon as I can afford to, really, I'd probably look for a CRF 300L or something like that. I'm not too worried about a full-on enduro bike. Speed isn't necessarily my game anymore. I'm not too worried. I'd just rather have something reliable that I never have to worry about. And like you guys, if I thought I'm going to ride down to Spain, I could just jump on it and ride down to Spain.
How attached to this XT are you?
How attached am I?
Yeah.
He's going to make you an offer. Gird your loins, George.
It won't leave my hands, to be honest.
So I would venture that you could go to Spain on this bike.
I could do. At the moment, currently, it doesn't have any lights. I can't turn it off on the ignition.
Go on, what else?
The suspension's really saggy. It's all things that I need to spend a bit of time and money on. I've got a young daughter now, so that's really put a stop to... I used to find things in my shed to do, whereas now I hanker for time in my shed. Nothing against my wife. She's really good. I want to be a helpful dad rather than a distant dad. You know, I try and spend as much time as I can with her.
Has the XT ever let you down whilst you've been out on the trail?
Not on a trail, no. It has on the road twice.
If you've managed to arrange a number of days away from home, especially when you've got a young family, and you're thinking, right, I'm going to Spain for 7 days or 10 days or whatever, you're not going to want to take a bike that you don't particularly trust, because that time is so precious, right, away from work and away from the family, that you want to have a good trip. You don't want to end up spending 4 days organising somebody to come with a van and take your bike back home, because, you know, that's the end of your holiday, really.
That's exactly right. Whenever I'm riding around here, normally I only tend to ride when I know my wife's at home. She's got a horse box, which is the recovery vehicle in my eyes.
One thing I noticed with a lot of newer riders as well is they really struggle to find other people to ride with. And we talk to a lot of people like that. We talk to people like that at the festivals. It's finding like-minded people that have the same time availability that you have to go out riding with. Is that the case for you, George? Are you just meeting people through the TRF, or have you got other pals that are into riding?
You're completely right. I must admit, when I first went out, the first couple of times, I thought, that's right, there'll be loads of people I'll bump into in the lane and I can have a chat with them. And one of them might say, come on, I like your bike, or something like that. And then we become friends. Reality, never seen a soul ever, I don't think, around here locally. When I did join the TRF, I actually forgot my wallet the first meeting that we went to. So I knew no one, absolutely no one.
Oh, you didn't get your hand in, did you? Fucked it completely.
I was stood at the bar without a drink. You know what it's like? If you're nursing a pint, you can stand at a bar, can't you, on your own and not know anyone, because you've got a reason you're there, and that's because you're drinking your pint. When you don't know anyone, it's very daunting when you haven't got a pint in your hands, or a bit of Dutch courage maybe, you know. Luckily, a chap called Stuart came over and started chatting to me. He was absolutely brilliant. He's actually in a similar situation to me. He's ridden quad bikes for years on lanes. He wanted to get into bikes more, 2 wheels rather than the 4 wheels. So he was in a similar situation to me. And I've so far I've met another chap who actually lives just down the road from me in the next village on, called Andy. We seem to get on very well. We do often talk and meet, and our local TRF had a woodland ride the other day. I must admit, I was very nervous, a bit like coming on here. I was very nervous about going to this woodland day, because I could just imagine everybody on enduro bikes and absolutely creaming it around, and because it's all single track in the woodlands, you're just holding everyone up. I took the XT, and that was the first time the XT had really been on a public outing, if you like. It performed really well, and I wasn't really, there was plenty of people I held up. but I wasn't holding up the whole pack that I thought I would be. Me and Andy, we sort of rode together quite a bit that day. There's a few mishaps. It was great fun, but this is part of why I messaged you. I must admit I wasn't expecting to be on the podcast.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, and now I see what you mean. I had in my mind that everybody in the TRF was Ricky Carmichael or Dougie Lampkin or Adam Raga, and they were all ex-racers or they still race enduros now and things like that. But it isn't. There's such a varied group of people. Don't get me wrong, there's people going around on 2-stroke enduro machines and they're absolutely flying, but they're not worried if you hold them up at an event like that. For example, Martin, who's the chairman, he rides sidecar. Before I actually joined the TRF, I was quite nervous and I wanted to know a bit more about it, or I wanted to see what they did a bit more. And just around the corner from our house, going up onto Exmoor, they had another woodland ride. And I messaged Martin to see if it'd be possible that I could go and have a look. Just didn't want to ride, just wanted to go and have a look. And me and the wife had a babysitter again, luckily. And she came along with me because she was interested in it, liked seeing the bikes, doesn't necessarily have an interest in off-road. Well, I say doesn't have an interest in off-road. She completely didn't have an interest in off-road, thought it was pointless. Why would you want to go out and get muddy? And, even though she's very much, a welly sort of girl anyway, but she didn't see the attraction to it. We got there and watched it, and it was brilliant. And then Martin ended up taking Catherine on the sidecar. I said to Catherine, "Oh, you might want to take your jacket off because you'll probably get hot, having to balance and stuff like that." And everybody around me started shouting straight away, "No, put your jacket back on. She'll need it for the extra protection." I was like, "Why, how does he ride?" They all said, we will give it some. Anyway, she came back absolutely buzzing. Absolutely loved it. So she was converted. I don't know if she will take up trail riding at all, but she was completely converted just by that. She had never experienced it before, but loved it. But she's, she got on the back of mine, whereas there was no way I'd go on the back of a bike with anyone else, Going back to the bike thing, a lot of the correct bike is the bike that's suitable for you. Her first bike was a BMW G310 GS. And I sort of pushed her in that direction because I thought that'd be a great bike. Where we live, we don't have tarmac. The roads are tarmac, but they're muddy lanes, very muddy lanes. You've probably got a mile before you get to clean tarmac. And our driveway is uphill and it's all loose stone. And I thought she needs something that's small enough, light enough, handle a bit of a bumpy ride and the dirt. She rode the bike for a bit and I picked it up and I loved it. She rode it for a bit and absolutely hated it. Absolutely hate. She just for some reason she just couldn't get on with it. It wasn't the power because she rides quite steadily. So I said, why don't you try a CB500X? Because I thought another bigger bike can handle a bit touring, comfortable to ride, enough power for her. She bought it, loved it for a few months, and then we had Martha. So that put a stop to her riding when we found out she was pregnant. After we had Martha, I encouraged her to get back on her bike, and she was riding around our little paddock at home. And she fell off, as you quite often do on road tyres on wet grass. It's not really going to end that well, and it wasn't a great idea of mine in the first place, to be honest. She lost the enthusiasm for that bike completely, and to be honest, it put her off riding a motorbike in general.
These are big bikes for somebody 5'5", I would say.
I didn't know much about it. Obviously, other dealers as well, when we went to look at the bikes, they were like, "Oh yeah, they're the perfect bike for you." And I wanted something that could handle the lanes absolutely fine and would maybe give her a bit of confidence. I was completely wrong. To be honest, it knocked her confidence, and I'll hold my hands up to that. It completely knocked her confidence. They weren't the right bikes for her. So she decided she was going to sell her bike, and that was that. I rode it down to Bridge Motorcycles down in Exeter, and there's a chap there called Matt, I believe. And Matt said, before you do hang up your boots, why don't you just take another bike out? So she took out I want to say a 500L. I need to...
The CL. It's like a scrambler version, yeah, with the same engine in it, isn't it?
That's right. Anyway, she took it out and she quite liked it. And then she took out a Honda Rebel, the 500 Rebel, and she absolutely fell in love with it. Her riding that bike in our lanes really is the most unsuitable bike for our drive and around our lanes. It's completely changed her. She's got so much confidence because she can put her feet on the floor and she can paddle if she needs to. And it just goes to show that my encouragement for these semi-adventure bikes was completely wrong.
But it sounds like you've had a fairly positive experience. Is it the Somerset TRF?
Yes, I really have, to be honest. They're all very welcoming, now. Now that I've got my wallet and could buy a pint at the bar, my nerves are better.
But also your expectation of what the TRF was going to be like is very interesting, isn't it, Clive? Because how old are you, George?
I'm 32.
32. Now, that's not funny because the old image of the TRF doesn't seem to have come into your expectation of it at all, does it? The old expectation of it being that it's just lots of blokes in tweed caps and sandals. That wasn't your impression of it at all, was it?
No. To be honest, I did think it was going to be, I don't know how to put it politely to them, but yeah, older chaps.
Mature.
Yeah, mature chaps, maybe on old twin shock bikes that could still absolutely blast around a track, and then younger guys that were, into enduro racing. And I did find it very daunting initially joining the TRF. And then when I spoke to Martin, I went up and had a look at the Woodland Day that they did. I was gutted I didn't have a go myself, to be honest, and take my bike. And there was even a chap there. He offered me to take his Beta bout, I believe, and that was a full enduro bike. And I said, well, no, I don't want to drop it. He said, if you drop it, you drop it. Just go and have a blast. And to be honest, I bottled it.
Your email prompted me to think really about the ways that I've met people over the years, because I've mentioned it before, when I first went to the TRF around here in Cumbria, I had a really not a negative experience, but a very neutral experience. Like, nobody spoke to me, nobody was organising beginners rides. I kind of went to a meeting, got chatting to one other new guy. I think I went out riding with him once, and that was it. And then it was really, I was on my own again. That kind of whole getting to know people in the TRF thing failed. And I stress to say it's different now because the groups are a lot more welcoming. The membership has trebled over the 20 odd years that I've been a member, and groups are more aware that they need to be more welcoming and get more people into the hobby to help with lobbying to keep the trails open. But it got me thinking about ways that you can meet other people. The Lightweight Adventurers Festival was a really a good example of that. So Mark and Jamie basically organised a ride-in to the festival. So they organised for people to meet at a certain cafe, and there was probably about 60 or 70 people there. And I reckon nearly all of those people arrived on their own, with maybe a couple of exceptions. But we spent 2 or 3 hours at this cafe, drinking coffee, eating bacon sandwiches, chatting. And by the end of it, everybody had pallied up with somebody. So my point is, go to anything and everything that's on. If you see something that's organised, get yourself down there. Chat to people, meet people. There's going to be other people in the same boat that don't know anybody else. People will gravitate to each other. We've heard loads of stories about people meeting at the early lightweight festivals and becoming friends and going on trips together and things like that. So that's what I really urge people to do, is if you are riding on your own, look at what's going on in the local groups and go along to those events, because you are going to meet people that way. And we're bikers, right? So we are friendly people. Another way I've made lifelong friends. I went in my early days of biking, I booked onto a charity ride in Morocco. There were I think there was about 10 people on road bikes and maybe 15 people on dirt bikes. I still count 4, 5 or 6 of those guys as friends now. Nearly 20 years later, I'm still in touch with a bunch of these people, and I've ridden with them. I ended up living and, renting a room off a guy in London for about 4 years. So that's another great way to meet people, and you do very quickly bond on a trip like that. So that's another great way of meeting people. And I guess the other thing is, join the TRF. Of course you should join the TRF, no doubt about it. Some groups may be a little bit more reticent than others, but get involved, offer to help out, go and help with horse events, or go and help with fixing the trails and things like that. And you're going to meet people through doing things like that as well.
But also, it's way better just going out and riding by yourself.
It's not, though, is it? Not when you're starting off. Because there's so many things. There's like a level of fear when you first start out, especially round our way. And again, I've told this story before. The first time I went out on my brand new KTM EXC, it was round your way where there's that slab it's like a 4-foot rock step. Unfortunately, I was coming down it. or maybe unfortunately, I was coming down it, didn't kind of see it, and there's no way I was going to stop. So I had to ride down it. I think if I'd been coming the other way, I wouldn't have tried to ride up it at that stage. But I remember, again, I've said it before, but I remember thinking that, like, what the fuck have I done? I've wasted all this money on a bike and I'm never going to ride it again because that's terrifying. Of course, I did persevere. There used to be things called forums, chat groups, and that's how I met you, Noel, wasn't it?
We met on a forum, didn't we? Yeah.
I think it was the old TBM magazine forum. And I think I just posted anybody in the Cumbria area out trail riding. You responded and Mr. Hill responded.
It was one of the very first internet dates, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Never mind. Harry met Sally.
To be honest, my friend Andy, that I quite often message, get on well with in the TRF and road with, we actually met on the forum as well. So Somerset TRF still use a forum online. It's not on Facebook or it's not on Instagram or anything like that. It's a forum online. He had posted about a new member thing because he's a new member as well. It was something to do with tyres, a new member from his village. And I said, hello, I'm from just down the road. And I felt like an absolute idiot after I'd sent it, thinking they're all going to see that and think he's just trying to, like, oh, look at me, I'm your neighbour sort of thing. Funnily enough, it worked because the next meeting, he came straight up to me and we started chatting and we chatted for ages and it really worked. And that was only, I haven't been to that many meetings. I haven't been a member for that long. And he does listen to your podcast, actually, because I messaged him earlier to see if he had any questions he could think of for you guys. And so he has given me a couple of ideas, yeah.
What did he ask?
I'll go back to the riding solo thing. What do you guys think, seriously, of riding solo? And I don't mean just as a novice. Put it this way, I wouldn't have ridden any trails if I wasn't able to ride solo. And I wouldn't be into it now, realistically.
We both do it, me to a lesser extent. When I do ride solo, it's because it's kind of a spur of the moment thing. Everybody's gone out and I've got, well, great, the weather's nice, I'm going out on my bike. I do it. I think I ride maybe at 70% rather than, 80% maybe, just to be a little bit more cautious. I make sure I got my phone in my pocket and I tend to tell my wife or one of my lads where I'm going, just in case. But round our way, there's always walkers, isn't there? So you're not going to lie on the ground for very long with a broken leg or whatever. But then in 22 years of riding, I also haven't broken my leg. So, no, I have actually. I broke my leg when I was 16. What am I talking about? But that was on a busy road in Coventry. So
I'm a big fan of it just because I like to stop a lot to take photographs. And I often find it really frustrating that I have to keep going. I have one great group that rides very conservatively, but even then, I think if I'm by myself, I would always probably ride 10 to 15 miles an hour slower than the people I'm riding with, even with the people that say they take it easy. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I enjoy it more, but I do enjoy it a lot. I just like the freedom of it to be able to stop and ride at my own pace.
We've got our new friend Nick, though. He's currently down in Bosnia or Croatia, and he seems to delight in riding on his own, doesn't he? So he's pretty much ridden the Tet all the way, or parts of the Tet all the way down to Eastern Europe, and then he's going to come back on the ACT by the sound of things. And he's very new to riding. I remember watching his first video before I met him. He got to his first part of the Tet in Spain or wherever it was and fell off after about 10 yards, and I'm thinking, he's a fucking idiot. I'm not watching any more of his videos. But he's stuck with it. He's doing well. And he likes a challenge. That's part of the adventure, isn't it? Doing it on his own for him, I think.
This might be a good time to direct people in the direction of your incredible Instagram account. And this was something I was looking forward to talking to you about because it's some great stuff on there. But I think you've got a really good eye for photography. Do you not want to stop and take pictures a lot when you're on your bike?
My Instagram is a private account. It's not open to all, but by all means, if people want to follow me, they can. I'm always worried because everyone that is on my followers, they're all my friends. Now, I quite often take pictures of tractors and my motorbikes and Land Rovers and nice countryside scenes and stuff like that.
Perfect.
Superb.
It is to you, but I'm always worried about putting too much crap on there, really.
No, my favourite pictures of yours, George, are the match ploughing ones. I fucking love that. It's so...
Oh, they're gorgeous. What are they taken on? Are they on a Samsung phone?
It's a Samsung.
I thought it might be.
I've had it a couple of years. Yeah. It's a...
22.
It is.
Some of the pictures, man, they're fantastic.
You're going to get at least another 7 or 8 followers after this podcast.
One of the gems is the green steam train going over the bridge with the green tractor underneath it.
I didn't know if I could fit under that bridge. I was with a tractor and hedge trimmer. The hedge trimmer, when it's folded up on the back of the tractor, sticks up above the cab quite high. I don't know if you can see it on the picture there.
So that was your tractor?
That's me driving it. I was edging my way through the bridge whilst checking, and then I could hear the rumble of the train. Now, I've got to be honest, I'm an absolute anorak. More than you ever imagine. My ambition in life is to own a steam engine. A big steam engine. I absolutely love it. Of all mechanical things, it's the only mechanical thing which is alive.
Can I just say, if there's anybody listening to this podcast that would say no to owning a steam engine, then you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. Why wouldn't you want to own a steam engine?
I heard the rumble, I ran up the road, and it was just perfect timing.
Amazing.
To get the picture.
Can I just ask you about one of the other pictures, which is of 2 bantams, a hen and a cockerel, I think, sitting on your track rod end underneath your Land Rover?
Well, these are the chickens that you took to work with you, didn't you?
Not chickens, the hens. Did you actually drive to work and they stayed balanced on your track rod ends?
I'm going to say it on here. People are going to think I'm an absolute Barry bullshit, but this is a true story. We had a cockerel. Every night, he just went through a stage of disappearance. When I go to shut the coop up, they're my wife's chickens, but whenever we used to go shut the coop up, he was never there.
He said chickens. He's a proper farmer.
He means hens.
Poultry flock. This chicken was never in the coop, and I could never figure out where he went. So to be honest, I just left him. I thought we've got hay bales at home for the horse and stuff like that. I just thought he was up there roosting. One morning, I was in the workshop. I could hear a cockerel. I thought, that's bloody strange. Dad came up to me. He's like, "Can you hear a cockerel?"
How far from home is work?
It's a half-hour drive across the Quantock Hills. Got to work. There was a bloody black bantam. I said to Dad, I was like, "That looks just like our cockerel." He said, "No, it can't be." I caught him and I phoned my wife and said, "Is the black cockerel at home?" He wasn't named at this point. No, I can't find him anywhere. This is about an hour later. I couldn't find him anywhere. In the meantime, I caught the cockerel. He is in a cardboard box. And my mum went home and because she lives just down the road, got some corn. And so he was happy in there. I got home that night, released him, and he went straight up to the bantam hens. I must in the morning just check my Land Rover that I haven't left the windows open or anything like that. I thought I must have left the windows open. He had flown in there. And then when I got to work, I opened up the doors. And that night, I had a look, and lo and behold, he was perched on the track rod of my Defender. He couldn't have gone all that way. And the same bloody thing happened again. So much so, there was chicken shit on the axle of the Land Rover where he'd been perched, and this was obviously a regular occurrence. He had done it a couple of times. Sad side of things, though.
No, don't say it. You didn't.
Is that he's disappeared mysteriously. We actually named him Steve McQueen. He has unfortunately disappeared. I'm hoping he's just died of old age, but realistically, he's living it up with a pheasant somewhere on the Quantock somewhere.
So have you got any more questions for us?
Not about us.
It kind of is a bit. It's sort of why I've got your T-shirt and stuff like that. Genuinely, I do think you guys are great. I listen to every episode, and it's funny, the first couple of episodes, I actually thought you were my mates.
We are now, though, so you were right.
When you hear someone's voice, I listen to you a lot, and you do feel that you know someone. Anyway, I thought you were my mates. You had no idea who I was.
Well, that's what you thought, but it turns out we've been following you very closely. We know about your chickens, we know about your tractors.
One thing I was going to ask, I'm not very savvy with computers. With GPS guidance, I use OS maps. So I will use the TRF map, Green Roads map, copy that onto a proper OS map, and I highlight where the trail is. Now that works for me because I'm quite good with map reading. If there's anything that I'm unsure of, whether I've marked the right place or anything like that, I just don't ride it. With actual map reading, it's easy to get lost. But what kind of basic GPS guidance systems are there that you can download your GPS files to?
There's a lot of people in your position because the Green Road Map is a very new thing. It's a resource that has only really just been made available to people in the last year or 2 years or something like that. Traditionally, it's been word of mouth, people marking maps up, you taking your map to the TRF and somebody helps you mark your map up. So that's the way we've had to cope for years. So now with the Green Road Map, the idea is that each region keeps their area up to date. So if there's any TROs, temporary restriction orders, they will be marked on the GRM so you know It's a live map. As such, they don't allow you to create routes on it. So what you do have to do is you have to do either what you've done and mark your own map, or transpose the routes that you see on the GRM into some digital mapping solution, which you can then save as a GPX. Now, I think a GPX is a Garmin-specific file. Now, I must confess to being very lazy. So what I will do, if I'm going riding somewhere, I will just ask our circle of friends far and wide if they've got a GPX route for North Wales, for example. So I tend to use and abuse other people's time and efforts. You can either use a mapping app on your phone, such as the OSM OpenStreetMaps app, which I think a lot of people are really happy with. I've got a Garmin XT, which I really, really like, because basically if somebody sends you a GPX file to your phone, you can just WhatsApp these files to your phone. You then download that file to your file system on your phone. When you link your phone with your Garmin XT, the Garmin XT will link to the Garmin Drive app on your phone, and it will recognize that there's a new GPX file on your phone. Doesn't matter where it is, anywhere on your phone, which goes, there's a new GPX. Do you want to upload it to your Garmin device, as in my Garmin XT? And I go, yes, and then it's there. And that's it. You just follow a line, basically, on the map that's in front of you. You don't need, with the Garmin, you don't need additional maps. You don't get a very detailed map, but it's got a basic map for all over Europe, I think mine is. So I could just get a GPX file and from somebody and follow it. And that's what I do.
My answer is, and I'm going to do a bit of name dropping as part of this answer. I'm as much of a Luddite as you probably, George, but I have only just this week, for the very first time, created my own GPX file. And it was done for John Mitchinson. He was coming up from Rally Raid, he was coming up to the Lake District. And I was away with King of the Tet, John Ross, in the spring. And he's a big fan of Osman Maps. And he put the Osman Map app on my phone.
The OSM OpenStreetMap.
Yes. And he gave me a little tutorial on it one night, which probably went in one ear out the other. But it did illustrate to me what a brilliant thing it is and how intuitive it is to use. So the other night, for John Mitchinson, I just sort of opened it up and looked at it again for the first time and discovered it was really easy to create the route that I knew around the Lake District by just dropping pins on it almost, and it linked them up and created a route. I could then create a GPX file from that I could email to him. But I use a Garmin Montana, the Basecamp app, to upload to my Garmin Montana. But now I realise that I could create a GPX file on Osman Maps, almost mail it to myself, import it into Basecamp, and then upload it to my good old Garmin Montana. Everyone you speak to has a different sort of method, don't they, turns out, for satellite navigation. And that's mine. And I think mine's fairly simplistic, as it might suit you to go down that road, perhaps.
So the app we're both talking about is the OSM and then a plus symbol, OSMAND plus.
Oh, it's brilliant. And the apps download and they're very detailed. It just seemed... they're very complicated, but they're also quite intuitive to use, I find.
I'm disappointed, John, that you actually went to Noel and didn't come to me, and I've got about 3 different ones. Mitchinson, Rally Raid.
Yeah, I know, it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
I thought he knew I'd be far more capable of that sort of thing.
Probably been let down by you in the past and knows I've got a better local knowledge than you have. Because you're an off-comer, essentially.
Racist.
With countryside respect, it's becoming a bit of a hot topic where people are trying to get green lanes closed and boats closed. I know that the TRF, they do fight the cause very well. How do you guys feel about, you quite often see a group of lads that ride in their motocross bikes and stuff like that and tearing up the countryside. I'm always worried about being related to those in the public's eyes. I don't want to be one of those people. And you've talked before on the podcast about having noisy exhausts and things like that. Unfortunately, my XT, I couldn't find a genuine exhaust, like a good genuine exhaust, so I ended up buying an Arrow exhaust for it. And even with the decibel killer in, it's still quite a loud bike. So I find myself riding in second gear and ticking over quite a lot. And with countryside respect, what would be your top tips to keep people happy? because I've come across people that have told me that I shouldn't be riding here and things like that, and you have to then explain.
I suppose you have to bear in mind that tossers on crossers, untaxed, unlicensed, just go wherever they want. They're not going to get caught by ANPR, and they're not going to get caught by the cops because the cops aren't equipped to stop them. So, but the point of that, me saying that, is your KTM or your Honda CRF doesn't look any different to somebody that's not into motorbikes than one of those, full-on motocrossers that people are riding. There's a few different ways to approach it. First of all, you need to make sure that where you are riding is legal, and kind of know that, get as much knowledge as you can about the lane so you can talk calmly and sensibly and convince people that you do have a right to be there. The other thing is that most TRF groups are involved with, I can't remember what they're called now, but CSRs or something like that. I can't remember what it is at all. Editor's note, they are local access forums, LAFs. TRF group will have a representative on an local access issues board, where there will be members of the police, there will be local councils, there'll be county councils, there'll be all representatives of walking groups, horse groups, all that kind of thing. That's a really useful thing for us to be involved with, because it helps people understand why we are allowed to be there. We're really lucky up in the Lake District because we are involved in one of those groups. Also, the head of the tourism board here and the national park are quite not supportive, but they understand what we're doing, and they can see how it is bringing money into the economy and attracting people into the area, because more and more people do it. But I think the important thing is, when you do come across people on the lanes, is just to behave really respectfully and calmly. If people do kind of block your way, which people will do at times deliberately, that's happened to me, just pass them very carefully, very calmly, and if they do get in your way, then just wait for them to get out of the way. And always be reasonable with people. Take your helmet off, let them see the grey beard and the grey hair, and talk to them knowledgeably, I think.
Our friend Greg Villalobos said something once that stuck with me forever, when he said that he had realised that a great way to ride is to treat people like horses. And so when you see people almost go down to that kind of pace, as if you have just met a horse, I think all of that stuff that the trail riding community is doing sort of falls by the wayside when just a pack of people ride past full pelt. And I think we were almost guilty of that in Wales recently, Clive, where we were with big bikes and the pace was quick, and we were just riding, I think, way too quick, weren't we, really? I think if people see a load of bikes, and this is part of my issue with group riding, is that people will often ride way quicker than they probably would left to their own devices. But when packs are just riding around at full pelt, almost riding down a lane pretty much as quick as they can, I think that causes a lot of issues when people see that from a distance. It's not some people are just enjoying the countryside and looking left and right. They're just riding full pelt. Apart from treating people like horses, I would just say keep the pace down, especially if there's people around. Don't come over as just a group of people out trying to have an enduro race.
And in some ways you have to do that, because you don't know what's going to be around the next bend. Certainly in the Lake District, where the lanes are very popular with many different types of users, you've just got to imagine there's a toddler or a puppy around the next bend and ride accordingly.
Yeah, so give everyone you meet a polo or an apple would be my advice.
One thing for me, coming from a agricultural side, the people in the countryside, rurally, people get very annoyed with noise, leaving gates open. Now, gates is a massive thing. If you're in a group ride and you're the last person through a gate and you don't know whether that gate was open or closed when the first person went through, shut that gate. It takes seconds to get off, to shut the gate. If you're undecided whether the gate was open or closed, shut it. There's no farmer ever that has moaned because their sheep are still in the field.
That's a great point.
Could I just say on that point about gates, there is an etiquette to riding with a group of people with opening and closing gates. So generally, the person that is leading should just be allowed to lead and not have to open a gate. They stop. The second person then opens the gate. The third person then closes the gate, and then it cycles within the group. So the leader is leading. He doesn't have to do anything. Second and third, and you move around the group. So you only open every, fourth gate or something like that. The reality is that whoever's leading tends to open the gate as well, and then the second person closes the gate.
To be honest, 99% of people that listen to your podcast and are in the TRF, they all shut the gates behind them.
Oh, we've met some of these people. They're right dickheads. Don't believe it.
It is an issue, and that's one sure way to piss off a landowner, to be honest. And same with erosion. We all slip our wheels from time to time. You can't help a wheel spin, but when people deliberately wheel spin and create ruts and treat trail like an enduro track, apart from teams that do go out and help fill in ruts and stabilise the trails again. It doesn't just happen sometimes, especially in the middle of nowhere where soil erosion's a big thing. You then get a heavy rainstorm after that, and it will eventually erode and erode. And that is a big thing for landowners.
Part of the marketing effort for the TRF to the general public, though, is that, and it happens a lot in Cumbria, is we help now to maintain the lanes. So where the county council doesn't have the resources to fix potholes, let alone occasionally used unpaved roads, we do an awful lot of the work for them. So again, get involved with your TRF and help them fix lanes. We supply gates for farmers as well, where the gate has taken a battering, not by us, but the gate is just broken. We will actually pay for and go and fit a gate for a farmer as well on the lanes that we use fairly regularly. So that kind of thing goes quite a long way. Farmers are using these tracks as well to get around on their quad bikes, so they appreciate it as well.
That's the same as the Somerset TRF, and I'm sure many other TRFs locally as well. That is partly what I have a keen interest for, is the whole improvement side of things as well, and to keep it going for, I hope that one day my daughter, I will be able to take her out for a ride on them, and I hope they're still there then. And it is a great way of getting out and about in the countryside and enjoy it, like you say, Noel, to stop and take photos. I stopped in front of a combine that was broken in a field the other day, and there wasn't anyone around, but I stopped to take a photo because it made a nice shot and things like that. And there's spectacular views. If you see a nice view, just stop and admire it for a minute rather than see it out the peripheral vision and it's gone again. With trail riding, when I first started, I used to wear all of my road biking jacket and my trousers because I was still riding on the tarmac more than what I was riding off-road realistically around us, and there were short lanes, and I was getting hot instantly. I've recently gone completely away from that, and I wear protective off-road gear and like jersey and trousers. For someone completely novice who just wanted to go out and give it a go, what would be the ideal novice gear to wear? And don't get me wrong, Adventure Spec, their stuff looks absolutely lovely, but not everyone is wanting to go out and spend a fair bit of money initially.
I would say try and get some, and Noel will say something very different. I would say try and get some used body armour off eBay or somewhere like that, and then you can pretty much wear whatever you like over the top. You should try and get something that's abrasion resistant, obviously, but if you've got some body armour and something that's more abrasion resistant than not, then that's the way to go. And then you slowly build up your kit over a certain amount of time. You're right. But Adventure Spec, Knox, it's all about layering. I know they're not cheap, but Knox do the armoured AA shirts. Adventure Spec do their super shirt. Those things are game changers, really, because it allows you then to layer up or layer down depending on the weather. Obviously, helmets, gloves, boots, spend as much money as you can, get good pieces of those kit, and then you can wear any old waterproof can go over the top, any jacket can go over the top once you've got that armoured layer sorted out. Noel, what would you say that's different?
There's so much gear about, isn't there? Plenty for all sort of budgets, isn't there? I'm road riding still in Risha gear that I bought 10 years ago for, like 100 quid pants, 100 quid jacket, maybe even less than that, but they're still good enough for what I do. There's lots of different price ranges, isn't there, for gear, but I would say any old gear, if you're starting out, just get what you can afford.
You don't need to go Gore-Tex either. I think this is one thing that I've learned, because you can buy relatively cheap but actually very waterproof things to go over the top. They're not going to breathe, but they're going to keep you dry in the cold and the wet. So spend your money on a protective layer, but then wear whatever you've got otherwise. I've got some Revit waterproof jacket and trousers that work really well.
And also, don't get wrapped up. I would say if you're just starting out, don't get too tied up in motorcycle-specific gear. There's probably some pretty good waterproof gear down your local agricultural merchant, isn't there? The stuff that people milk in is probably way more waterproof than a lot of the motorcycle stuff you can buy.
Well, there's probably good stuff in your cupboard under the stairs right now. That said, if you've got the money, fucking enjoy it and spend it. Go and get the latest Moscow Moto £2,200 suit. Looks amazing.
But I have just discovered, it is great just riding in body armour and your favourite shirt. It's very liberating, isn't it, rather than having a great big textile jacket on. I've been enjoying that recently in the good weather.
I found my textile jackets to make me become very hot. With a lot of the lanes aren't that quick because they're quite technical narrow lanes, I wear a lot of my downhill mountain bike from when I used to ride. I started wearing some of that. I must admit, I find the upper body horrible, but I think that's probably because I've put on a bit of timber since when I was last doing it. But then I have progressed, and I've bought some Ace Abyss knee guards and things like that, and they're much, much better. I do enjoy that. I bought a fender bag from Ace Abyss just to go on the front of the XT. Now, I hate drilling holes or anything like that on an old bike like that. So this just clips over the mud guard and does up tight, and that's where my waterproofs live on that. And it works absolutely fine. Even in the summer, it just, to be honest, they stay on the bike. It does work. It's a cycling jacket from my mountain biking days. Really thin layer, and I can just chuck it over whatever I've got on. And I think that's a great thing. It folds up to barely anything. Cycling stuff can be just as good.
Those mudguard bags are really good until they fall off.
It has fallen off once, I must admit. I've also got a tool tube. So on the agricultural machinery, you always get these tool tubes. And I've got one of those Jubilee clipped to the back of my XT. The XT's got a metal rack from new. I Jubilee clip it to that, and it's solid. I can get an inner tube in there, tyre levers, the cycling pump, but it would get me out of trouble if I needed it to. Again, going back to social media, you always see all these fancy gear that you can get for your bike and the big saddle bags and stuff like that. But you don't necessarily need it, just anything that will carry something that's secure. I think being secure is a very important point. You need to join the TRF, really. I think that is the best way. I have had a great experience meeting new people and a new sort of walk of life, really. They're all, most of them know each other a long time. You got on with very well. There's group organised rides, which I keep being encouraged to go on. Somerset TRF, they seem to have up to 6 people on a group ride. That's how you meet people, and I strongly recommend for any newbie into it, get a bike that will get you from A to B, even if you don't think it's the best bike, and go out and give it a go and join the TRF. But it is brilliant.
It's one of my ambitions, George, is to cut. And then once it came close to it, I've always wanted to cut. I'm not saying you should organise this because it's impossible, but I would love to mow a field of grass on a tractor. God, I'd love to do that. And I once went to a mate of mine, and I just happened to land at his house at the right time. And he said, and I told him about this stream. He said, well, yeah, go in here, take that Master Ferguson and go out. And I did a first circuit of the field, and the mower broke down, and that was it.
Well, maybe we can organise something.
Well, that was a very enjoyable chat with George, and it was fantastic to meet him sort of properly, finally. Next week, we've got a bit of a legend lined up. It's the first time we've had somebody on the podcast for a second time, and I think you'll enjoy it. We're really looking forward to catching up with him again. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.